Good job. Thank you for that introduction, Norbert. And thank you to Terry and John for inviting me to come and speak today. And thank you to all of you who have come to honor this nation's fallen heroes and to remember why we have the freedoms that we continue to enjoy every day. It's my honor to be here, to stand before you, and in part represent the 10,000 men and women, soldiers and airmen of the Wisconsin National Guard. I'd like to get started by talking just a little bit about my military experience. As Terry mentioned during his introduction, I served 8 years in the Army National Guard. I first enlisted in 2004, serving in an artillery unit, but for almost the entire duration of my service, we would not execute any artillery missions. We spent the majority of the time training for a war that needed more infantry, convoy security, military police, and guard force. Our entire 32nd Brigade, more than 3,000 soldiers, was put on alert for potential deployment in 2008. We spent that year training on basic Army warrior tasks, convoy security operations, and infantry tactics. 2009 started with a 2-month pre-mobilization training in Fort Bliss, Texas, before heading to Camp Cropper, Iraq, just outside of Baghdad. The 32nd Brigade was scattered to various missions. Our battalion, the 120th, was primarily stationed in Camp Cropper. My unit, Alpha Battery, was assigned to the High Value Detention Facility. Detainees at that compound included members of Saddam's former regime. And while I can't speak to the details of the mission, I can tell you that we were lucky to have been assigned to that location and at that point in time. Most of our 100 or so detainees spoke English and were well educated. While just down the street, through a maze of 12-foot tall cement walls, another detention facility held more than 2,000 detainees, many of which acted out in ways that were difficult to endure. We had our share of rocket and mortar fire as well, and spent plenty of nights running to a bunker for cover. Thankfully, our unit did not sustain any casualties. We were very fortunate for the mission that we were assigned, and there is rarely a day that goes by that I don't think about how different things may have been. During this war and others throughout history, many did not see such luck. Many would never again see their homes. Many would never smell the fresh-cut hay in the warm sun. Many would never again hold their children, or see them hit a baseball for the first time, or hear their excited voices on Christmas morning. A few scenes always come to mind for me when I think of this day. Those are usually of a little girl or a wife. I think of the disappointment and confusion of that little girl. She's not fully grasping the situation, not fully understanding what it means that Daddy isn't coming home. And as the words begin to blur from her tears, she just stares at a poster that reads, "Daddy, Daughter, Dance." She will never have that special moment with him. Or I think of the 24-year-old wife, stroller packed with extra snacks, and wearing some softer sandals to provide a little comfort as she stands and looks on at a ceremony such as this. She has her son's hand in her left, and her right cradled around her unborn daughter, whose due date is only a month away. She brought along her favorite picnic basket, and will soon have lunch as a family, her and her children, and his picture in gravestone. They will never again be together, and her children will never know the man who wanted nothing more than to be their daddy. I don't tell you these stories to bring you to tears. I say them to help us remember. To remember those whom we stand here today to honor, those who will never come home. For me, this day has never been a day about honoring those who have served. It's a day to honor those who cannot be here with us. The number of casualties in U.S. wars is simply astounding. For most of us, this is probably the only time of year when we are reminded of the wars that took so many lives. Operation Enduring Freedom, 2,349 service members died. Operation Iraqi Freedom, 4,424 U.S. service members died. Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, 383. The Vietnam conflict, 58,220. The Korean War, 36,574. World War II, 405,399. World War I, 116,516. And the Civil War, the bloodiest of all U.S. conflicts, claimed the lives of an estimated 620,000 Americans. As you may already know, this year marks the 150th anniversary of what is considered the first official Memorial Day celebration in Waterloo, New York. And what began as a day to decorate the graves of fallen Civil War soldiers has become an occasion to solemnly remember those whose lives were lost in combat serving in our nation's conflicts. The sheer magnitude of the human cost for the Civil War required establishing the country's first national cemetery. By 1890, most northern states had made the tradition of honoring the fallen and decorating their grave sites a state holiday. Southern states honored their Civil War dead on different days until after World War I, when the nation expanded the tradition to commemorate all American service members who perished in the nation's wars. In 1968, Congress established Memorial Day to be held the last Monday in May, a change that would take effect in 1971, the same year that Memorial Day became a federal holiday. And a century earlier, James Garfield delivered a speech at the first Memorial Day ceremony on May 30th, 1868. He addressed the several thousand people gathered at Arlington National Cemetery. "If silence is ever golden," Garfield said, "it must be beside the graves of 15,000 men whose lives were more significant than speech and whose death was a poem the music of which can never be sung." Perhaps many of you now view Memorial Day in a different light than you had as a child or a young adult. I know that this day means more to me now than it ever had before. Maybe because Stacey and I have 4 young children of our own, including identical triplets, who by some miracle were conceived and born into this world, and by some mystery were almost taken from it. All 3 survived at the mercy of modern medicine, 2 of whom have some special needs, and are a constant reminder to live each day as if it may be our last, and also to take the time to remember those who have come and gone before us. Our time on this earth is short. Let's make the most of it. Let's make the most of it for those who cannot. For those who have given everything so we can have anything. And this is why we do not celebrate Memorial Day. We commemorate it. As our nation grows, fewer and fewer of us put on the military uniform, and the burden of defending our nation is borne by fewer and fewer Americans. And while we should absolutely continue to enjoy those liberties available to us in the United States, we should also honor those who cannot be here to share those liberties with us, and remember the families for whom Memorial Day will never be a celebration. Would you please join me in observing a moment of silence? Thank you for taking the time to honor this solemn holiday and allowing me the privilege of speaking at your ceremony.